Hey everyone, it's Joe here. Welcome to this live video. I'm with Rory Hornstein
Yeah.
From Alberta.
Calgary, Alberta.
Yes.
That's right.
Cool. So we're going to talk about the gut microbiome. What are the best things? I guess the main topic is going to be what's the best things to do to get back a healthy gut microbiome, because a lot of people we're working with would self-identify as probably not having an optimal microbiome. Maybe most people don't. This is actually what I want to talk about with you. And also, like, well, if I have a healthy microbiome, how do I know it's a healthy microbiome? So yeah, that's what we're going to talk about. So why is Rory the person that can provide really knowledgeable insights? Well, I'll let her tell you just quickly, Rory, like about your background and your experience.
Okay, perfect. I've been in private practice in Canada for about 17 years. And I started in the area of eating disorders and sport nutrition. And from there went to gut health. Gut health was always my passion. I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease when I was 12 in 1986. So you can do the math. And had it a long time, many bowel resections, actually had an ostomy last year and had it reversed. So as a result of having IBD, or inflammatory bowel disease, for 36 years, I definitely have IBS. So that's my background. And now I specialize in that area, working with gastroenterologists across the country and in Calgary with patients who struggle with IBS.
That, I mean, obviously your personal experience with IBD, but the fact that you're regularly speaking with the gastroenterologist, and not just one, so you're not kind of stuck in that individual's way of thinking,
right.
But I guess many. So yeah, that's what I want to tap into, and for our clients as well. If you guys can, I just want to make sure that people can hear and see us. If you're watching this and you can hear and see me clearly, can you just comment like yes or something? Also say hi, say where you're from if you are watching us live. If you do watch this as a replay, please put a hashtag replay or something like that in the comments, because it will help bump it up so people actually see our discussion and get some useful information. So let's start with, it's a big area. Should we start with just like, what is gut microbiome?
Yeah, let's start with that. One of my favorite topics, and so much research is being done within the gut microbiome now. And I think when people have an understanding of what's going on in the gut, it makes it a little bit easier to find strategies to make a healthier one. So as infants, we're born with amazing diversity within our gut. And from there, over time, naturally, and as we age, we lose a lot of the diversity within the bacteria. When you're predisposed to conditions like IBS, or women who are going through perimenopause or menopause, where estrogen levels are dropping, or inflammation, or any of that, that can affect your microbiome at the same time. So our goal is to create as much diversity as we can within that bacteria, or gain it back if we've lost it. So the more diverse, the more those bacteria look different, the better it works. And that's because there's a gut-brain connection, in that the vagus nerve attaches the gut and the brain and connects it. And if you don't have great diversity within that bacteria, then it's much harder for you to manage things like insulin, if that's with weight, hormones, and cortisol in terms of inflammation. So the better the diversity of the gut, the better that connection is between the gut and the brain, and the easier it is to manage some of those conditions.
So if we're going back to like caveman days and stuff, did they have a more diverse microbiome than today? Do we even know? Or?
Yeah, I think I would assume that, only because we have so many environmental factors that they didn't have to put into play back then, especially in terms of diet.
And they were eating dirt and
right, diet and food and things like that are way more processed now, and sugars and things like that can cause inflammation. So I think they were luckier than we are now, but it's interesting, having had a gastrointestinal disorder for so long. None of this was on the table in the late 80s, and just in the last decade. There's so much more research linking so many different conditions and not just gut health with the gut microbiome in terms of cancers or diabetes or things like that, it's a benefit. So if somebody is predisposed to having more than one condition, by fixing that microbiome or healing it and allowing it time to recover, you can not just help the gut and the actual GI symptoms that you might be having as associated with IBS, but you might be helping a lot of other conditions at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And just like for some semantics, but I think gut microbiome refers to like not just bacteria, but some other microorganisms, even virus and parasites, I think. So it's like how all of these, these kind of microorganisms are interacting in your gut. You are supposed to have them. And the problem is not, it's not like, oh, I have this bacteria. Maybe it's overgrowing, but it's about the balance basically. So if things are not in balance, that's when we get issues. So we're talking about how to balance that whole microbiome, and then specifically microbiota. It's actually the bacteria, which is usually the thing that most people are talking about and what we're focusing on.
No, absolutely. And I think that's where something like prebiotics come in, where you're giving your body carbohydrates that feed on the good bacteria. It's not all about the stuff that you need to take away and restrict in order to make the microbiome a better and healthier place. It's also about the stuff that you have to give it to enhance the good bacteria that are already there.
Yes. So prebiotic being the food that the bacteria that's already there will ferment or eat.
Right.
And that helps them grow. So that helps with the balance we're talking about. Probiotic referring to a good bacteria. So prebiotic, the bacteria that's like the food it eats, and a probiotic is actually the bacteria that you're putting more of that into your gut. We'll talk about that. We had that question about probiotics, right? But we can get to that one in a second. Let's talk about does everyone with IBS then have a bad microbiome? What about you? You have bowel disease. Does that mean you automatically had a microbiome that's out of balance?
I'm going to make the assumption it's not great. Just based on how long I've had this, right? And I'm missing big chunks of my colon as well, and things like that. But I probably wouldn't use mine as a foundation to compare others, only because it's been through a lot. But I think that you can do things to enhance it, right? I think you have to work with what you have. And there are strategies, and they're evidence-based at this point, that can help maintain a good balance within that microbiome at the same time, right? So I don't think everybody with IBS has a horrible microbiome. If you're traveling and got a bug, right? There are certain things that might affect the microbiome, but in the short term, not the long term, right? And then there's different strategies you can use to kind of get back on track and more balanced, and it's something that might not last a lifetime.
Okay, let's talk about those strategies, because I know everyone watching is just like, Joe, shut up. How does it help me? What do I do? So let's talk about that. What are the strategies? Are they going to look different person to person? What do you do with a client? Should we talk about a case study, or do you have hey, I recommend everyone do this first, and if this works, do this, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, let's do that. I think that the best thing to do is to start with where the person is at, right? As opposed to just kind of giving everybody the same strategy in terms of, okay, we're going to, increase the fiber here, and we're going to look at low FODMAP or different kind of strategies. I think you really have to look at where the person, their medical history and the root cause of the IBS, and see what are the best strategies in terms of enhancing the microbiome from there. So looking at what people are eating, lifestyle choices, current bowel movements, things like that, any GI symptoms that we're currently having. And then from there, we can go to, okay, let's make it more individualized in terms of what strategies to be using. Some people have already tried a number of probiotics, right? And so when they come in, it's like, oh, I've tried this. And the question is, did it work? Well, not really. I didn't really notice a difference. I'm not sure. This one made it worse. So I stopped doing that. And really talking about, okay, if we're going to make dietary strategies work and look at the overall diet, is it worthwhile to start a probiotic at the very beginning, or do we make the dietary strategies and changes first and then look at enhancing the microbiome or the gut health with a probiotic afterwards? Really, really difficult to look at the entire picture if you're starting too many things at the same time, because you're never going to know what's working. So if somebody's not using a probiotic, I don't typically start a probiotic at the very beginning because it's too difficult to determine what's working. But maybe after the whole process and things are doing well, looking at a probiotic, and especially the kind of strain, is really important. The strain, the amount, right? Because not all of them are going to work. And some of them, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about low FODMAP, but some of them are not FODMAP safe and can cause worse issues in the long run, right?
So what I hear from you is there's a lot of factors. There is no one like set plan that you can just give everyone. This is, when we talk about gut issues, it's individualized. Like, I'm sorry to say it, everyone, like, I'm not making it up when I say, well, we need to speak to you and learn about your medical history. I need to see how you're eating. I need to know what potentially was the cause. What's your lifestyle like? Because they genuinely dictate what we're going to do and how you're going to advance through a certain protocol. So we have to be methodical about it. We want to eliminate possible confounding factors, for example, a probiotic, for example, other things that supplements or things you might be taking that could be an issue. But the context is important. And that's the same with most things in nutrition. It's like, Rory, I get people who are like, yeah, can I take this probiotic? And I'm like, well, who are you? What's your problem? Like, where do you, like, what do you eat? Like, what are your symptoms? You can't, how long is a piece of string? That's the example I always give. That's what they're asking. How long is a piece of string? Well, that depends on what string it is. So we cannot answer you unless we know more. And that's why, I think individualized approach is really the only way to tackle the digestive issues, help with symptoms, and then also, ultimately long-term, we want to help you restore your microbiome to be healthy so that you're not dictated by food and digestive symptoms all your life. What's an idea of like, where should someone start? Maybe they're like, let's just say they've had everything cleared and IBS was a diagnosis, no physiological issue, and they feel like their microbiome is messed up. They had an infection on holiday, or they've been using some sort of antibiotic for a long time. Where do you start?
So if it's the nice thing about some of the research that's being done is that it does link certain things with probiotics and that it can be efficient, like travel, right? And things like that. But the overall thing I think to start with is to look at what somebody is currently eating. Because if they're feeling symptomatic and there's a way to link some of the foods that they're having, especially if everything else has been ruled out, with certain GI symptoms, then it gives you a place to start. So whether that's looking at low FODMAP and looking at the total fructose load, knowing that, somebody's, trying to follow a plant-based diet and doesn't realize why they're so bloated all the time. And it's just because the load of the FODMAPs at each meal is causing these GI symptoms, and looking at educating in terms of, okay, you know what, you're doing a great job, because one of the most important dietary strategies to use is to ensure that they're adding enough fiber within their diet. And using a plant-based diet is a fantastic way to add a great amount of insoluble and soluble fiber into the diet. That being said, a lot of those plant-based foods can actually have difficulty with the absorption, and because of the FODMAP load. So looking at right? Like,
so what do we do? So what do we, what do we do?
Look like they're 6 months pregnant, right? And just like, because the load of, all of those high vegetables with the kale and the garlic and the onion and all of those foods can cause issues. But on the other hand, they're doing a great job enhancing so much fiber within the diet, which is going to change that microbiome and is a great dietary strategy. So finding a balance between that. And I know within the last 10 months, for sure, plant-based has been the huge trend, right?
So finding the balance, that's super important because this is the confusion. You know, if you're watching live, like, let me put yes in the comments if I'm on the right track. But the confusion is, hey, you're supposed to eat, this, plant-based diet, like all of these fiber foods, they're prebiotic fibers, so they're good for your microbiome. So people are like, okay, yeah, I can do that. And then you get your low FODMAP list and it's like, do not eat, this is high FODMAP. And so people are getting super confused. What am I supposed to do?
Right.
So how do you help them navigate that?
The part is figuring out, okay, well, let's figure out your triggers. So, if you're somebody who really believes in going more plant-based as opposed to restrictive and optimizing your fiber and doing the right things and including those prebiotic foods, then that's why low FODMAP isn't going to work if you do this forever, right? So the goal of doing low FODMAP is to figure out what your triggers are. And then that way you can achieve that balance in that you're only limiting those foods that you're having a difficult time absorbing, watching the load, but you're still able to optimize the fiber at the same time, right?
Yeah. So a lot of people are commenting yes, that's the problem. So to summarize what Rory said, and we can build on it, but it's essentially, I understand the problem that you're getting those mixed messages. You would start low FODMAP first, but to try to help with the symptoms, we want to reintroduce rechallenged foods as soon as possible because that diversity is important. Eliminating things unnecessarily is not ideal in the long run. It's not good. So we want to help you figure out those triggers through this methodical elimination rechallenge process. When we do that and we figure out, you can eat these certain vegetables or XYZ, whatever it is, then we need to be smart about it, but we can start introducing that back into your diet in a very systematic way. So you're getting those prebiotics, you're not triggering your symptoms, you're still, working through that, potentially that low FODMAP process to identify more triggers, to make sure you feel better. But at the same time, we are starting to introduce foods and things that are in the long term going to help with that diversity in your gut. That's basically what you said, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's interesting is that, again, when you're achieving high fiber and you're trying to eat all these fruits and vegetables and going more plant-based, a lot of people will kind of increase the amount of carbs and reduce the protein at the same time, right? And that carbohydrate load, if that's one of the triggers, is going to cause more and more GI symptoms over time. I kind of label it carbitarian, right? Where somebody's going more plant-based, but they have so many carbs and all of a sudden their protein has dropped. So it's not just about the gut health kind of strategies, but looking at the overall diet in terms of the macros at the same time to balance those out.
And this is why, I know it sounds like a lot, but this is why we work one-to-one with people or on a more individual level. So giving you feedback every week, for example, about what you are doing, and based on how you respond, that dictates what we do next, rather than just being like, okay, here's your plan that's generic, follow that and you live happily ever after. Done. Easy. If we could do it like that, I would. If there was a test you could do and you didn't have to change anything in your life, you could eat however you wanted, you could, sit on the couch and watch TV. All you had to do was do a little finger prick test and take a supplement and it fixed your issues. I would be all for that. I would be promoting that, but that doesn't exist. This is the reality of how we navigate the process, and it's just about whether you're ready to do it properly or not. And the more I speak with other experts, because sometimes I think, well, maybe I'm just like, I need to speak to other people. Maybe my way is not the only way, but everyone I speak to, especially someone like you who's more experienced, more knowledgeable, you also do it that way because there is no other.
It's very different than following if somebody gives you paleo or somebody gives you keto, where it's very clear cut. This is how you follow it and go, right? There's menu plans, there's recipes, there's things like that. You have all of those things incorporated with low FODMAP at the same time, but it is a really individualized process and it's different for everybody. And that's what makes it so exciting to work with people, because you can never guess what's going to happen, even from the get-go. How fast are their symptoms going to be resolved, right? How fast are they going to see improvement? How long will they have to go until they do see improvement, right? Based on, how much has gone on with the gut and their gut history. And especially in terms of the reintroduction, I find the challenge in the personalization when you're really looking at long-term gut health is the most exciting part, because everybody comes out with completely different results. Right. And it can change. Even if you're coming out with a trigger at the very beginning doesn't mean that's your trigger long term. It just means that's where you're at right now.
Yeah. And what you said just made me think of something with microbiome. Am I out of focus? With gut bacteria testing stool samples where they read your gut microbiome and things. The area is still very new. We don't know what is the healthy balance. It's not black and white like that, because someone who has a perceived healthy gut who lives in, say, Southeast Asia, that actually the whole composition of their microbiome looks different than someone in Europe or in Canada. But they both got healthy microbiomes, but because they grew up in different environments, eating different foods, there isn't everyone has this much lactobacillus and this much bifidoba. It actually is very diversified. So you can't do a test that tells you. We're just not there. Maybe in the future they've mapped out every different possibility, maybe, but we're a long way from that. So then, so we eat prebiotic, plant-based foods in line with what we tolerate. So also following some sort of protocol there. What else to get a healthy microbiome? Is there other diet factors that help? Are there non-diet factors we need to think about?
Yeah, so I think that a big one is fermented foods, right? Fermented foods are a big one in terms of promoting that diversity and can really help. And there's a wide range of fermented foods available. Not all of them have probiotics, but the fermentation process itself, like things like yogurt, right? You can get a natural probiotic from foods without having to take a supplement. If somebody does have, lactose intolerance or can't tolerate the dairy and can't have the yogurt or the cultured milks, and things like that, then looking at, sourdough. I don't know about you, but I know that I have so many clients who go, no, I can't have wheat. It's the first thing that's like, no wheat for me. I've been gluten-free for 10 years, right? And I'm like, it's most likely looking at what they're eating. And especially if it's somebody who's more plant-based, I'm like, it's not going to be the wheat, right? Or the gluten, that's not going to be your issue, because they can tolerate things like sourdough, right? And sourdough is fantastic in terms of fermentation and is safe, right? So those foods we can add into the diet, like kimchi or kombucha and things like that. And of course, when you go to the fermented food pathway, there's a lot in terms of the marketing. I know that a lot of the products that are sold kombucha are ridiculously high in sugar. So of course that's going to add another factor, but looking at those fermented foods is a really good way to enhance the microbiome.
Cool. Yeah. Just quickly on that bread topic, I had, I just want to use one of my fancy banners, you see.
Oh, very nice.
If you go to diet versus disease, even if you search diet versus disease and then gluten sensitivity, I had one article that was a couple of years ago now, but it's called sorry, but your gluten sensitivity is actually a fructan intolerance.
Yeah.
For most, yes, there are some people, but for the majority. And so what happens with sourdough is the fermentation process, if you don't cheat and use yeast, it ferments the FODMAPs, and then it's actually a bread that most people do tolerate, like you said.
Yeah.
Okay, what about non-diet? What about, I don't know, sleep or exercise? Do they matter?
There's actually, I love, I don't know if you're familiar with gut microbiota for health.com. I don't have a fancy banner. And I don't work there. So, but gut microbiota for health.com, it's all one word, is amazing. And it's all clinical evidence-based research on the gut microbiome. Yes. That is nice. This
on
is
the
why
fly.
you know somebody who knows how to do the tech. So yeah, it is amazing. And they have, you can just type in sleep and they come up with all the evidence-based art research articles in terms of how that affects the microbiome, or, you know, probiotics. There's like a bazillion of them, right? But they're all really, update them every couple of weeks. So the research out there is from like 2020 last week. And it's phenomenal. But that's why I like thyroid, right? Chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, like all of these things that can be affected by the gut microbiome. It's a really good basis of education and research. That's all like, this is where it's at. So
isn't it fun to be working in this specific industry niche? I guess there's so many things, like it's just going to get bigger and bigger.
Bacteria in the gut would be like my passion, right?
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so there's other issues as well, other than not other issues. There are other ways you can positively influence your gut microbiome. That's not just food related, and it really, and of course, stress and anxiety. I think just quickly to touch on that, we know, like you said in the beginning, the vagus nerve. That's what is physically connecting your gut-brain axis. That's what that is.
Yeah.
And so, because a lot of people have heard of gut-brain axis, I would say. Most. And so it's essentially like if you're at a heightened stress or anxious about things, it can present as digestive issues, but like it does appear that it actually can change the gut microbiome as well, the balance of bacteria and things there.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Looking at, if you want to add to that, go.
No, I'm absolutely, like, I think that when you look at stress and anxiety and mental health in general, a lot of those same people would struggle with IBS-like symptoms, right? Or did they start with IBS-like symptoms where they started with the urgency and the diarrhea and things like that? How can that not cause stress, right? If you know that you can't get in your car and drive, 20 minutes to an appointment, that's going to be stressful. Right. So I think it was interesting for me over the, 6 months or so that I've started really working more virtually, that a lot of the clients that I worked with who struggle with these digestive disorders really felt a lot better at home because they didn't have to go out to appointments. And just relieving that stress, knowing that, they could be at home, they could be close to a washroom if they needed, things like that, right? It actually they improved their symptoms a lot faster following any kind of dietary intervention that we did during the pandemic, as opposed to before, where it's like, now they walk into my office and they're like, right, really stressed out about, is there a washroom close by, or right, because they're so intense.
Yeah, I mean, there's the stress of like, my symptoms, but also like, I need to find a babysitter, or I have to drive across town. I have to that's why I'm like, well, if you do it virtually with us, you can just be in your pajamas on Sunday morning. Like I couldn't care less. It's got to be convenient and easy, and not the treatment we want to provide has to not add stress to your life. Otherwise, it's counterintuitive.
Yeah. Well, and I think you turn it around and just use it as an opportunity, knowing that, eating out, we're not doing it as often as we did before, just as a result of all this whole situation. That's going to be harder for you to manage some of your GI symptoms with the unknowns of some of the foods that they're using at a restaurant, the whole package. This is a great opportunity to really go into your gut and kind of say, okay, it's not just about getting rid of GI symptoms, but how can I make this a long-lasting change?
Cool. How do I know when I have improved my gut microbiome?
So I think that one of the most obvious ones is just less GI symptoms. Right. So if you're somebody who already has constipation, diarrhea, hemorrhoids, any of that kind of stuff, that if it's improved, then probably there are changes being made. If there's other conditions, like you're looking at energy or joint pain or things like that, and you've added some more fiber, but just even omega-3, which can help reduce inflammation, a lot of dietary changes, right? And things like that. And all of a sudden you're just feeling better, then I think you can assume that you're making good decisions and it's leading to a healthier gut.
Yeah. So there's not really an objective way to measure it. If we talk about the stool, like microbiome testing, I guess you could compare it to itself. Like, for example, if you did the test and it gives you a reading of a breakdown of certain bacterial strains, and then you did it later, maybe it's accurate to itself. But like I said, there is no like ratio or maybe very loosely, but there's no like specific formula. It's healthy microbiome will look different, based on where you were brought up, where my parents are from versus where yours are. Like it's going to look different. So it's more about how you feel, and the gut symptoms is kind of a direct indicator. Does that mean when we're kids and we don't have gut issues that our microbiome is healthier?
Probably. I think we're predisposed to having a better gut microbiome, and I think that they're doing more research now. And again, that now you have the banner. There's amazing research just in terms of infancy, and even looking at maternal nutrition and breastfeeding and different things that it actually can affect the microbiome before somebody's born.
Vaginal birth versus C-section.
Yeah. There's some pretty fascinating things looking back, and obviously genetics, right? Genetics don't help a lot of people, right? If it's in your family, then you've got that also that could compromise the microbiome long term, just because you're predisposed to having something like this. Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, in terms of somebody walking in, and it can work for some people, right? Like even a modified kind of keto version of going really super low carb, where you're compromising how much overall fiber that you're doing, and looking at increasing some fats, whether it's, clean or dirty keto, one or the other. A lot of people feel worse when they've done keto, like 4 to 5 months. If their microbiome isn't working great, then maybe it's because of the lack of fiber. Right. And they just don't feel good on it. Right. Like it didn't work in terms of weight loss, but they just don't feel good on it. It's not the same for everybody. But as soon as you kind of keep it lower carb, and then, without compromising the total fiber load to help with the bacteria and the balance of the microbiome, that can help as well. And that, I think it goes right back, Joe, to where we were talking about with being individualized. It's so different for everybody.
Yes. Using keto as an example, some people will respond well initially, and someone won't, eating the same thing. And that's due to the individual differences. And then that's a whole nother topic in itself. But if you're someone who understands like biology and human physiology as well, not having plant fibers does not sound like a good long-term approach to me.
No.
But that's a whole nother topic. Last thing. Should we be taking probiotics? That was kind of the second most voted question from the client group. Should we be taking probiotics? Is there a natural way with diet? I guess we kind of covered that part. Should we be taking probiotics?
I really think rather than starting with a probiotic, you start looking at the foundation of the root of the issue, fix the diet, and then enhance or supplement whatever kind of changes were made with a specific probiotic that is the right strain, that is addressing the right issues, and then looking at the probiotic after dietary changes are made.
So it's not just like, oh, here is the probiotic, which are all the same.
They're not.
The probiotics. They're really different. Some of them suck. Like they won't even make it through your stomach acid before they.
Yeah. And I know we're wrapping up, but I had a client who actually was feeling phenomenal on like low FOD, like big changes on low FODMAP, and a lot of the GI symptoms were better. And she was still feeling like every time she took her probiotic, she just kind of didn't feel great. And she found that those symptoms actually escalated through the second week of elimination. So I went back and I'm like, which probiotic? She's like, well, I just switched my probiotic it didn't tell me, right at the beginning of low FODMAP. And it was a brand that the first ingredient was fructose. And I'm like, this is not going to work, right? Like this is the reason why you're having issues. So it's really important to look at the type of probiotic. They're not all the same. And look at the root as opposed to just kind of taking a random probiotic, because there's so many on the market.
Yeah. So there's the ingredients in the probiotic. Then there's the actual strain. What probiotic are you having? What bacteria?
How much of it are you actually getting, right?
Yeah. what's the proven dose? And then also, for how long are you supposed to have it? Like, I know there's some evidence where it's like, well, people take it and it works for a while, but then it starts to like stop helping. So then it's like, well, should I be cycling this, on and off? Maybe it's kind of just there's certain, like, for example, traveler's diarrhea. You can take a probiotic that can actually help with that, but it's like, that's a tool and it has its use at that time, but it's not something you need to take forever. And I don't want you to be buying a probiotic for the rest of your life. So there is lots of things to factor in. I'm trying to think, like, people who say weren't working with us, where can you find that information? Well, if you can look on PubMed, you can do that.
You have, there's actually a great app in Canada, and it's not cheap. What I do if they're really looking for a probiotic, it's the Clinical Guide to Probiotic Supplements. That's what it's called.
That's an app?
Yeah, it's an app. And so that's the one I use if somebody really wants to, I don't know if you can see it. It's kind of blue.
Okay, are you on an iPhone?
Yeah.
Clinical Guide to Probiotic Supplements app. So there's that. Obviously, there's ask your dietitian. And then, because like for you, for example, Crohn's disease, like there's certain, with specific disease states, they do actually do some controlled trials.
This one is that, and you can't see, but it kind of filters by brand name, indication, age, gender, and then it gives you a list of all probiotics. So when you put in indication, if you have antibiotic-associated diarrhea in terms of prevention, you can do that. There's people with constipation. There's H. pylori. There's IBS. Like there's like 15 to 18 different ones. Traveler's diarrhea, or if you're just looking at reducing your LDL and total cholesterol, and it's all clinical evidence-based. If you're looking at reducing cholesterol, they'll give you an indication for adult use and then list whatever ones come on. And there's only like one or two, right? Like it's just like, it's not like a list of 30 of them. It just kind of identifies which ones would be best based on the probiotic strain, the dose. That gives you the number of doses per day and everything else. So that's the one it's kind of my go-to, and they update it all the time.
Cool. Awesome. Yep. Remember though, like, don't put a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. Okay. The probiotic is the Band-Aid.
No, it's a Band-Aid. I would really look at like some fermented foods and overall fiber. If you're eating a diet that's highly processed, doesn't have a lot of fiber in it, right? Is using a lot of FODMAPs, to try a probiotic on top of that is probably not going to be the best success rate.
No. Starting low FODMAP, trying to work through that very efficiently, not removing confounding variables. That includes probiotics. Later down the track, depending on how you respond, maybe there's a probiotic we can use to help you with your with the microbiome in the long term. Approach for you doing it on your own and living a healthy, happy life. If you want to do that process properly, please work with a dietitian. We do it online, obviously, but you can just see, like, we just scratched the surface. But that's why you got to get help with this stuff. Thanks, Rory. That was really great. I mean, there's so many things we need to talk about, and we'll definitely have you on to do a lot more. Yeah, thanks everyone. If whoever's watching, like if you're watching the replay as well, like if you've got a question, you can ask it in the comments, or like send me a message or something, and I'll try and get to everyone during the week. Yeah, I think that's it. Did you have anything else, or you think we've touched on the fundamentals?
Well, there is one question there that was just labeled for you, but I don't know if you want to answer that one or not.
Oh, why is Joe's microbiome so damned healthy? That's a very good question. My question to Tim was how does he know? How does he know? You know what? I prioritize good sleep. I take a lot of approaches that help with stress and anxiety, because I do have IBS that is definitely triggered by stress. And I get stress from my work, ironically, but running this business. So there's so many different approaches, but I think one of the main things is relationship with foods, stress, anxiety, sleeping well. Of course, ticking the boxes of eating a varied diet. I know what I can and can't tolerate, and I also know the quantities. I think that's important. Yeah, it's a good question, and it's it's not revolutionary. We've actually touched on everything that you need to do for a healthy gut microbiome. At least like the percentage play. That's the 90% of things you should focus on. Yeah. And then as you go, there's there's the probiotics. There's some other things that are kind of the small play. But if you can get the main parts right, being consistent as well, right, then you do yourself a lot of good. So cool. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone who tuned in. I hope you found that helpful. Oh, someone wrote here, the app is not in the App Store. Is it iPhone that you're using?
Yeah, it's an iPhone. Let me just see. The clinical guide. Did you put the clinical guide to probiotic supplements?
I think so. Let me look it up quickly. Just to clarify, the clinical?
Yeah. No, it's clinical guide. Clinical guide to probiotic supplements. You know what? It's Canadian.
Maybe you've got to be on the Canadian.
Yeah.
Right.
Well.
True. I don't see it either. Canada hiding their secrets.
Right, but we have such a good relationship with Australia. That's shocking.
Keep your secrets. All right. Well, yeah, we're both Commonwealth buddies. You got to share that stuff. No, maybe there must be. Maybe there's
a photo of it. Download it. I don't know, but I can send you the information on it.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to end the chat now and